Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I've done a lot of videos recently about fishing pressured bodies of water, things you can do to increase your odds at catching more fish. Because as we all know, right now there is a lot of pressure on our local lakes and rivers. It's just one of those things. More people are out fishing, and therefore the fish are getting more accustomed to the baits that we're using and the locations that we're looking to catch them at. Now, having said that, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad thing if you are fishing pressured water. In fact, I would sit here and argue that the anglers that come from bodies of water that are extremely pressured are generally much more well rounded anglers, and therefore they're able to fish almost all the different varieties. So, I wanted to do a little video today to kind of discuss why I think it's so important to fish pressured bodies of water. I came from the Chicagoland area. My tournaments really began on the Fox chain of lakes. Maybe you've heard of people get referred to as a chain rat. Those are people that are fishing one of the most heavily pressured bodies of water in the country. And it's not just by fishermen, it's by boats. And what I mean by that is, I think at one time, I don't know if this is still true, but at one time I had heard there were more boats per acre of water on the Fox chain of lakes than anywhere else in the country. It is an absolute zoo on a summer weekend. So, in some instances, not only is there a lot of fishing pressure, there also is a lot of big boat pressure, which means you have to plan your day accordingly because some areas you want to fish, you just can't fish because of the boat waves. It can get that busy, that insane out there. Now, having said all of that, I'm really, really happy that that's where I grew up fishing tournaments because it made me a much better angler. So I want to give you guys 5 reasons why I think it is important to fish heavily pressured bodies of water. Now, the first and foremost is it's going to make you a hardened angler. And what I mean by that is you're not going to catch fish on every cast. And because you're not, what it generally does is it gives you a mental strength to maintain your positivity and to stay in the game as you struggle to catch fish. So, on a place like the Fox Chain of Lakes, catching a limit is not an easy thing to do. If you catch a limit in some tournaments, it means you're going to go home with money in your pocket. Now, the positive part about that is every fish counts. Every time you catch a keeper, you're like, man, this makes me feel good. And it motivates you to do well. Versus when you go to a body of water that's a phenomenal fishery and you're catching 3 pounders going, this isn't going to help me because you know you need to catch 4 pounders. So, absolutely, it is way more fun to catch a pile of fish. But from the standpoint of mental toughness, fishing heavily pressured bodies of water really can put you in a much more positive place. I think the anglers that come from pressured bodies of water, when they go to a really good fishery, are much more capable of mentally staying in it, even when that lake's not tough. Versus you take somebody from a lake that produces 50 fish days and put them on a body of water where they might catch 5 keepers all day long. I tend to see those anglers spin out quite a bit more. So, from a mental standpoint, it really hardens you as an angler. It allows you to stay tough and mentally positive throughout the day. So, there is a very, very good uh, takeaway from that. Now, if you don't fish tournaments, it still doesn't change that mindset. There's a lot of anglers out there that go out to the lake, and if they don't catch anything in the first hour, they pack up and go home. The fish aren't biting that day. That's not necessarily true. If you know the fishing is going to be tough and you expect the fishing to be tough, you're much more willing to stay a longer time and try to figure the fish out. That's what fishing pressured water does. So that to me is a very, very good thing. The second positive is that it really makes you look at things a little bit differently. It makes you take into account all these different facets that are going into the day. I mentioned earlier boat traffic. Well, if you're fishing a tournament or you're out fun fishing and you know there's a part of the lake that is going to be absolutely unfishable based on boat waves and boat traffic by 10:30 in the morning on a Saturday afternoon, you might want to plan your day accordingly and fish it first thing in the day. Fish it before the pleasure boaters get out. You really start to take into account a lot of little details. Maybe you pay more attention to exactly where you caught that fish. Maybe you pay more attention to the type of weeds that you caught a fish out of. Maybe it's the way you worked a bait. But I do really think that when you're really struggling to get bites, you pay a lot more attention to what generated those strikes for you. So, from that standpoint, I think it's a very, very good thing. It makes anglers really study what it is that they're doing to catch more fish. Was it a bait choice? Is it a depth? Is it a type of cover? All these little things that you might not take into account if you're catching a ton of fish throughout the day. But what you can really do is almost hone in a much more solid pattern with fewer bites, versus going out and catching 30 bites off of every type of cover. So it allows anglers the ability to really put the pattern together, put the pieces of the puzzle together, which in my opinion is a very, very good thing, because then you can take those patterns that you've learned and apply them to other bodies of water throughout the country. Along those same lines, the third thing is it makes you think a little bit outside the box. And what I mean by that is when you're fishing a pressured body of water where every prime piece of cover is got a boat on it, and if a boat leaves, another one pulls up right away. Maybe it's a main lake point, maybe it's a bridge. The real obvious looking stuff is 100% going to be covered up throughout the day because there's that many anglers and they all know the prime pieces of cover. So it makes you think a little bit outside the box in terms of where you want to fish. Maybe you start exploring a little bit more by using your electronics, looking for that random laydown tree, or maybe that isolated little boulder. You start trying to look for those little sweet spots. And when you start doing that, what that does is allows you to really learn your equipment better and to learn what objects are truly holding fish. Yes, the prime pieces of cover are definitely great pieces of cover, but when you got 35 boats fishing it, they're not that good. You're much better off finding those isolated little sweet spots that you'd never look for normally because there aren't going to be 100 other guys that know where that spot is. So from that standpoint, I really like fishing pressured bodies of water because it makes you think differently. It makes you think from a different types of patterns. If everyone is fishing weed lines, maybe you should go to the inside weed line. Maybe you should go look for suspended fish. The point here is you think outside of the box because that's what you have to do in order to be successful on a lot of these lakes. So that's the third thing that's really good. The fourth thing is still along those same lines, but it generally means you go through a lot of different types of baits to find out what's working. On lakes that are really good fisheries, you can take almost any bait and go catch fish. You can fish your strengths to make it work. On lakes that are heavily pressured, you a lot of times have to really rotate through bait choices. You have to make little tweaks. Maybe you gotta change colors more. Maybe you change sizes. But I think a lot of times anglers that come from very heavily pressured bodies of water are more well-rounded anglers when it comes to bait selection. They identify the little nuances within colors and the way baits work that generates more strikes. It truly is something that you don't you don't really analyze if you don't have to. Meaning, if you're on a lake where you're throwing whatever bait it is, a crankbait, and you catch a pile of fish, you think that crankbait's the best bait. You don't ever switch. If you go to a pressured body of water and you take that same crankbait and you throw it for an hour and don't get a bite, you're probably going to put a different crankbait on. When you do that, you throw it for an hour, you don't get a bite, you put a third crankbait on, you throw it for an hour, maybe you get 2 bites. It gives you that little bit of confidence and you really start playing around with your baits more that help trigger just a couple more strikes, because on these pressured bodies of water, 1 or 2 bites makes a big difference. And I just feel like the anglers are more in tune with their bait choices. The last thing that I think it does, again, along the same lines again, is it makes you a more well-rounded angler from a water column standpoint. Meaning, I think a lot of anglers really will start fishing shallow. Like generally the process is an angler fishes shallow, They get comfortable with that. They go fish deep. They get comfortable with that. You start chasing suspending fish. That's the progression I would say most anglers go through. That progression happens a lot faster when you're fishing pressured bodies of water. And that's just a matter of the bank fish are generally the hardest hit. The offshore fish in the prime spots are the second hardest hit, and the suspended fish are the hardest to catch. So that's like where you work your way to. And generally speaking, again, along the same lines as what I was saying before, if you're on a lake that's not pressured and the fishing is good, you don't ever have to leave the bank. So you might not become a good offshore fisherman or suspended fisherman. If you finally leave the bank, you probably just start fishing offshore and you don't progress to the hardest fish to catch, which are those suspended fish. And yes, guys, you don't need forward-facing sonar to catch suspended fish. I've won a lot of tournaments without forward-facing sonar, catching suspended fish in 30 feet over 50 or 60 feet of water. It is very doable. It is harder, but it is very doable. The point here is, if you're fishing a pressured body of water, it generally increases it makes you want to leave the easy stuff first, because the easy stuff isn't working because everyone else is fishing it. Whether those are prime spots or just shallow water, it moves you through the transgression of becoming a better angler faster. And I think that's one reason why you're seeing a lot of anglers come from very pressured bodies of water do very, very well. There's a lot of anglers from the Fox Channel Lakes, where I'm from, that have done great. You look up by Minnesota and Minneapolis, you've got the, I'm drawing a blank, the Minnetonka chain, which is Lake Minnetonka, which has got a pile of great anglers that have come out of there. You look down by the lakes like Gunnersville and Chickamauga, some of the most heavily pressured bodies of water are producing lots of great fishermen. Down in Texas, you got Rayburn and Toledo Bend. I mean, there are so many people fishing these lakes, it's ridiculous. But the best anglers are honing their skill, figuring out a way to catch them on those pressured lakes, which means when they go to a unpressured lake, they are that much more adept at figuring out how to catch those fish as well. So don't necessarily just avoid fishing if your lake is heavily pressured. Use it as a learning ground. Use it as a process to make you a better angler. Hopefully, guys, you learned something from this video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, new video coming out tomorrow.